Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, March 10th, 2022. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. You know, someone mentioned in the comments that because I jam to the music every time, if you're watching the video, I jam to the music during the intro, but I sometimes play air drums, and there are no air drums. There are no drums. It's all synth. It should be keyboard. So I gave you some keyboard right there. It doesn't matter what you play.
It doesn't.
Air instrument wise, as long
Express
as you're playing.
yourself.
Exactly.
That's right. Always be jamming, Norman.
I could be DJing, right? It could be a big bass guitar. It could be a stand-up bass. It doesn't matter as long as you're feeling the music. Yeah, gotta build my skills up for the hurdle, which we're doing. Have you guys heard of hurdle?
Yeah, that's the music version of Wordle, where they play you a snippet and then they play you continually longer parts of that snippet until you choose that you guess the song. I've only done one, and it was I got it on I got the first square. It was too easy. I need to get back to it. Have you enjoyed it?
You got it on the first second?
Yeah, I wasn't. It's not even a second, right? It was Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. And it starts out with the and it's like so iconic, like you just know that one. And everybody was doing the same thing. It was an easy day. I need to go back and try it, the harder one.
I mean, it's one. It's a brilliant execution. It's a brilliant idea and a brilliant riff off of the popularity of Hurdle because it's once a day, the whole 6 tries thing. They took a format that was about 5 character letters or 5 character words and made it into, up to 30 seconds max. So they incrementally, as you want to get more clues, as guesses, they didn't make it a 1-to-1 relationship, but they found a remix of this that satisfies the same kind of trivia that you would have. And it's almost like an extreme version of a pub quiz, because pub quizzes have had this for forever. They play a snippet of a song and then you as a group try to solve it. And so for Hurdle, we've actually found it really fun to do it as a group, as a family.
Love it.
Me, Danica, and our housemate. And because it's wide ranging genres. And I find I suck. I suck at Hurdle. I can't do it. I can't. Wordle is much preferred for me. Yeah. Anyway, welcome to the show, everyone. We got Jeremy, we got Kishore here. Kishore, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I played Semantle and it's ruined Wordle for me. It's where instead of you find letters or snippets, it's like words that have similar definitions, and it takes you like hundreds of guesses to get to the point, and it broke me one night. So now I hate Wordle.
Wait.
And it's dead to me.
Explain that. So it's about meaning rather than spelling.
Right. And so you'll just type in a random word, like, plane, and it'll give you its proximity to the actual word. And it only gives you like a score if you're within the closest 1,000 words to it. So you oftentimes just start out like randomly typing in words until you get to within the first 1,000. But it's semantically similar. So it takes forever to kind of like get to that point.
I never considered that words might have degrees of proximity,
relationship in meaning, right? In definition. Like, how do they weight the relationships between meaning of 2 words?
Like, I remember typing in vacation and the word ended up being monthly, I think it was. And vacation was like, I don't know, like 50, 70 words away or something from monthly. It was something like that. And like,
wow,
my brain doesn't operate in that way. My brain operates with like the simple, like green or yellow, and I can handle that.
Have you guys seen the programmatic hardest Wordle? The riff on Wordle, that's the same format, right? It's 5-letter words you type in, but there is no fixed word to start. Like the based on what you type in, it's generating a word, and every guess is remixing that word to find to give you the hardest word possible. Does that make sense?
But when you get greens, they are locked in.
They are locked in, exactly. When you get greens, when you've nailed the algorithm down, it locks in a green. It might even lock in give you a yellow, but it doesn't want to give you a yellow. It changes it up, so it's really ends up being really obscure words. But it's the idea is that it's trying to prevent you from guessing it correctly while still following the rules of English and spelling.
This is for people for whom Wordle is too easy.
Sure. Yeah.
That's not
and
me.
Of course, yeah, no, and that's one of the appeals of Wordle is that the words end up being very common words, except for null. Null is the one word that that I think a lot of people were surprised was a solution. And of course, there's the one of the most popular riffs on it, which is Loodle. I want to give a shout out to Loodle, which was created by Gary and Leah Witta, our friends there. It's become very, very popular. It is the adult-rated, a crass version of Wordle, but again, same format. I haven't played it. It's not part of my regular routine, but apparently they have millions and millions of players, which speaks to the power of the format.
Got to give it a shout out to his engineer too. I forget. Is it
Adam
Nickerson?
Yeah. Also, as their producer when they were doing the talking. What was it? The
Animal Talking.
Animal Talking. Right.
Yep.
Right. The cultural hit of the moment, circa summer of 2020. Right. Almost 2 years ago now, they have now pivoted to Loodle. So good for them. Fast pacing, fast changing world. But speaking of Gary, I bring up Gary because, as you know, some of you out there longtime listeners of the podcast will know, Gary Witta was a third seat on this podcast. And I don't think he's been on the show since episode 500 was when we had him on last. It's a big milestone spectacular. And when Gary left the show, do you guys know when Gary left the show?
I'm guessing it was in the early 100s.
Yeah, it was
mid 100s,
mid to late 100s.
Yeah,
Gary left the show or didn't stop being a regular late episode 177 or so. I want to say, because episode 178 was the first appearance of one Jeremy Williams.
That's right.
You sat in for Gary. We're like, Gary, he's just playing with his new iPhone. He's waiting in line for an iPhone. I don't remember what it was. And we said, oh, Jeremy, I think at that point we had done a video with you.
We'd done the videos on the airfield.
Yes.
The pinball playfield light up kit and the Minitron arcade mod and what we called the Pixel Box.
The first version of the game frame.
That's right.
Your put together digital pixel art display. And since then, or roughly since then, we've been podcasting since. I mention it because, that tenure is coming to a close.
Tested podcast. I think we should see other people. What? I've met someone else.
That is the worst way to do this.
And her name is Game Development, and she's all I'm thinking about. And I need a break.
So how many years has it been? It's been that episode, the first episode that you're on was, I'm looking now, July 25th, 2013.
Wow.
Almost 10 years on this show. Almost 9 years, sorry, on this show.
To lay it out bluntly, though, for people who aren't getting it, this is Jeremy's last episode on the podcast. So we're announcing it today. It is we've been talking about it for a while, but Jeremy, as we've mentioned numerous times, you are now a full-time game developer working with friends of Tested and a longtime friends, Micah over at Other Ocean, the Space Jam game you'd worked on earlier last year when that movie came out, and it's really become your passion.
Yeah, I've loved doing the Tested podcast, but it is just not something that I'm able to devote the amount of mental attention that I want to or have been able to in the past. And I just want to be able to focus on work and the all-consuming thing that is game development. And let's reminisce and talk about it and get into it a little bit. But let's go through the news first, because I know there are 10 or 12 people out there that care that this might be my last show, but most people are here to hear all about the Apple event. Which
What an appropriate topic for was it maybe an Apple event we had you on to discuss? I know it became a big thing.
I
when
became
Apple,
known as like the Apple fanboy somehow. I don't know.
Somehow.
You must have been like an Android guy at the time or something.
Yeah, it was my experimental Android phase.
Yeah.
I kept on going back to it.
Yeah.
I actually listened to that first episode you are on. It was actually all Android. You were talking about the Nexus 7 and a Chromecast.
Wow.
So,
hey, Nexus 7, super popular. But yeah, you know, maybe it's because it was the shoes you had to fill. Because Gary was, so unapologetically an Apple fan back then, and so to sit into that role, maybe we just needed someone to occupy the same space. But yeah, we'll do some reminiscing. I apologize for those of you listening who did the spit takes of coffee or are sobbing in your cars listening to this. Pull over, take a break, take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay. Jeremy will still be on Twitter. You'll still be able to find his work, and we're still gonna hang out. But let's talk about some news, and we will spend some time reminiscing and talking about not only what we've what the journey we've been on together on this podcast, but also as part of Tested, and the projects we've done and how we've seen the maker community and technology and culture change in these past almost 10 years now. Kind of crazy. But first, this Apple event was the big news this week. It's probably the only major piece of news in the tech world, of obviously massive, crazy stuff going on in the world right now. But Apple had a peak performance event. They spelled it PEK. And leading up to it, it was announced like right before the event, like a week before. Everyone speculated, is this going to be the AR? Oh my God, if it was Jeremy, if Apple had announced their AR glasses,
yeah,
that could have compelled you to stay longer. As it's a new, it's finally AR. There'd be so much to say about it.
There would be a lot to say about it. We might have to dedicate 2 or 3 episodes to that.
That's right. But they didn't. It ended up being about processing and about some minor hardware updates. So maybe we'll start with some of the product updates just real quick. So there's a new iPhone SE Special Edition. Of course, when they say Special Edition, it's really the release special phone, because it's the phone that uses the previous generation chips, and it's the entry, their quote unquote budget level phone. So it's a third special edition phone. This one still has the Touch ID button, but now has better camera technology with their 12 megapixel camera, water resistance, and runs their A15 processor. So
is the A15 a year old? Is that not their flagship processor?
That is a good question.
I thought it was. I thought that was like their top of the line processor.
Yeah, it was. A15 was announced last September. Yeah, it's what's in the iPhone 13. So it's not the leftover. They're not binning chips, right? They're not using last year's stock.
It's pretty great little phone for $400 and some bucks. I mean, they've taken that flagship processor and put it in this smaller device, and I just think it's interesting that they are still making a Touch ID device, a Touch ID phone, and I wonder why that is. I don't think it's because of the cost of the larger screen that you would have to replace that with. I think people want it. I think there's a subset of people out there that are letting Apple know that Face ID and the missing button. Like, I think people like pressing a home button, and they like the ability to enter their password without looking at the device. There's just some people for whom that is still a priority, and I think that's interesting. I kind of miss it myself, although I also like the bigger screen, and I realize that it's a trade-off.
So I think there are a couple things going on here. One, with COVID and masks, and Face ID is still not working great with masks. Maybe this gives people another option. It's more reason to keep Touch ID around, since it is a more reliable form of password entry and accessing Apple Pay, right? Still a big deal, a thing that you want to push for all their users because it makes them money. I think processor consistency is a good thing because it is fast, and even though the hardware here may not be leveraging all of that processing, like with there's only one camera, right? Doesn't have all the same video capabilities. The app ecosystem, so developers don't have to start supporting as older phones as with these new phones being bought this year. They did bump the price up $30 from $400 to $430. Whatever. The more cynical side of me thinks that in many parts of the world, a lot of people associate the newness of the phones with the premiumness with a luxury factor. So people see 3 cameras on the back of the phone. They know you've paid over $1,000 for that phone. They see the Face ID on the phone. It becomes a status symbol, as the iPhone is in so many places. It's why you see a lot of merchants selling these faux backs of phones that have dummy camera lenses.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. So that the people who buy the iPhone non-Pro can look like they have the Pro model.
What? If you
it's a
do
real
that,
thing.
question your choices in life. If that's what
Hey.
you're doing.
That's like
That
the
is
Titanic putting an extra smokestack.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Just for balance and consistency, so it could look like a 3-stack ship, a cruise, a star line or a ship line, whatever it is. But yeah, it's a thing, and Apple does market their phones at a high price, and for a lot of their consumers, it's not just about the functionality; it's about what the status indicates.
I think
this
this
is
is
a
Apple's
differentiating
best
factor.
Yeah, I think this is Apple's best buy easily at this price point and with the features they include. Two things that I wonder about. They really did not make a big deal about 5G on this phone, even though it's there. Like it was almost mentioned in passing that it was there, and I kind of was just taken aback by that. Maybe they just don't think 5G is a big selling point for any of these phones. And then I wonder if putting the A15 in means we're going to get the M chips in the flagship phones.
Oh, yes.
Come this fall when they come out. And really, part of the reason that this is so cheap is like we're seeing the extra stock of A15 that they produced for the flagship phones come into this phone that kind of helps keep costs down on a phone like this. But I do think this is the end of the A line when it comes to the phones.
Now you're thinking the supply chains, sure. And I think that's absolutely right. And the biggest telegraph of that is the new iPads that were announced, iPad Airs, sorry. And these have the M chips. And now they have so many iPad lines where they have the iPad Mini, which is I think a fantastic buy because it had that A15 chip and it smaller form factor, one hand holdable, still great screen. The standard iPad is now the budget line. It's kind of like what they did with the Mac versus MacBook Air and the Mac Pro.
It's like the SE because
Pro.
It's the iPad with the button, with the home button.
Right. That's right. That's right. And then in the premium line, you have the the iPad Air and the iPad Pros. And now the iPad Air has an M1 chip. So
the Pro has an M1 chip too.
Yeah, exactly. So it has like performance parity. The only thing it doesn't have is the extra cameras, and form factor is a little bit different. But it has those nice flat edges. So same design language as the Pros.
Yep.
10.9-inch screen. It's HDR screen. No ProMotion, so no higher refresh rate. That's what the Pro ones have. And supports all the accessories like the pencil and the cases and that keyboard, that super expensive Magic Keyboard.
The pencil thing's a big deal because the previous edition of Air did not support the pencil. And if you're a pencil user, that would really stunk.
I don't know if you guys know anyone who's an iPad native, but my daughter is, and it's amazing.
What's a computer? Remember that commercial? What's a computer?
Yeah, I'm not sure. She's never asked for a computer. She really can use the iPad in to do work. In Procreate, she'll do art, and she'll use video editors to make videos all the time. She'll do all of her work on the iPad, and she doesn't even have a keyboard. She knows how to use all of the multi-finger gestures that are, some are even app specific, where you're using 4 or 5 fingers and you're squishing and you're moving things. She can manipulate the interface of an iPad and get around that thing and multitask. I didn't know what you could do. It's really impressive.
Jeremy, I have a 3-year-old, and let me tell you, the most impressive and also scary thing is his ability to multitask. He doesn't know he can't read. He can recognize icons. He doesn't know, he knows Safari because he knows that there's a youtube.com landing page in Safari for him on my parents' iPad that he gets to use. But he can multitask by no look, moving away my hand, trying to interact with the iPad, swiping away dad's hand, while with the other hand, swiping away the wrong application if he doesn't get his YouTube screen. So he can he just pushes the icon in the home screen.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not his YouTube landing page, or it doesn't have the shortcuts he wants. Then he knows how to fling it away.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he can wax on, wax off, and swipe away my hand trying to help him. What his eyes fixated on the screen, a no look move.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like iOS and iPadOS years ago crossed this threshold from completely user-friendly, like onboarding anybody who's never used a touchscreen before, to having these layers of complexity that are really so deep, and they're not even worth telling people about because they'll just get confused. Like, you just have to know about them or be curious enough to, educate yourself about them. And for these younger people who are growing up with these interfaces, this is natural. Like, this is, a UI that they're comfortable with. And that was a bold move on Apple's part. I got to give them credit for that.
Yeah. The only thing I can't get over the hump is the lack of like a real keyboard. Like, because even when you have, those integrated keyboards that Apple sells, it's not the same as having a real keyboard. And that's, I think, what's held me off from like switching to the iPad Pro as like a not a primary device, but like a device I use much more often.
It's also price creep. This thing starts with a Wi-Fi model at $600, and here's the rub: that's 64 gigs of storage only. So that's abysmal for something that people are going to be using as a primary computer, obviously with no expandable storage. And if you want that keyboard, if you want to use their ecosystem of keyboards, the keyboards start at $180 for the Smart Keyboard Folio. And if you want the super fancy Magic Keyboard, that's still $300. So it's up to $1,000.
It's funny that it has 64 gigs of storage, and their M1 Max chip has 61 gigs of RAM.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So for people using this, as a primary computer, it's a tough recommendation because at some point you're pricing up and moving into the Pro territory, and they really gouge you on the accessories and the storage.
That's totally fair, but the battery gains that you get from going from the A line to the M line is so significant that I wonder if this is just worthwhile, because you're not just like constantly charging this on necessarily even on like a daily basis.
Well, maybe in the future they're going to change things up, because maybe the balance between internal storage and memory, active memory active memory drains power, and if there are use cases people are looking forward is having things load faster, be stored in RAM, and they could have. There could be a system where the long-term storage is mostly just for caching, for example, and then you need to keep those charged all the time. They did announce a new form factor computer, a new, not an iMac. I guess they are retiring the 27-inch iMac, but instead they want people to buy, what is this?
It's a Mac Studio, but it's not the Mac Pro either, right? It's like a really powerful Mac Mini,
but taller. It's like a stretched out Mac Mini.
No, it's and it's not cheap either. Like, it starts at $2,000.
Yeah, but no one's going to get the $2,000 version. It's really the $4,000 version that you're going to get, because that's the one with the chip that's interesting, the M1 Ultra.
And that's the new chip that they announced. So 4 inches tall, about 8 inches by 8 inches. So a sizable footprint. Does have an SD card slot reader, and it does have USB ports in the back, Thunderbolt ports in the back, Ethernet. So it is a full a workstation that you have to plug a monitor into. But as opposed to running the M1 or the M1 Max, they announced the M1 Ultra, which was the big surprise of this event. And if looking into the chip, this is basically two M1 Maxes running at the same time, but with their special sauce, so that you don't get diminishing returns like you would in the past of running like dual Xenon CPUs, or on the graphics side, SLI style dual GPUs.
I loved this presentation. This got my nerd on hardcore. Like, I really thought like this was a really strong presentation if you're talking to people who care about processing power. Like, I'd love to see the benchmarks. I want to see how powerful this thing actually is in the field. But I mean, they made dual processors look slow and antiquated. They like put two processors next to each other, and they had these red lines going between them, saying like it's so slow with them
It's
having to
rubber banded
communicate
together.
Right.
They're like
And
alligator clips.
They're like the M1 has a feature what we haven't talked about yet, and then they revealed that you could combine two of them like physically side by side. Solder like 1,000 conductors together and make them appear as a single processor to every process on the computer, and it just looked really good. And then the benchmarks that they were stating are just astronomical, like super fast IO and mass amounts of memory. Like there's 128 gigabytes of unified memory in the Ultra, and just like the read write speeds are beyond anything that peripherals can do right now, and it just looks really cool. And the number of displays that it can drive, it's just like all these crazy numbers. I'll be curious to hear if you guys pick one up for productivity, what it's like to do Final Cut on it, or
a $4,000 computer. You're asking me if I'm buying a $4,000 computer?
I was mainly thinking of Tested that does a little more video production than you do, but yeah,
fair.
We're not in need of that. I think the M1, even the M1 Max, is something that we were considering in the laptop form factor with the MacBook Pros, and that handles, that can crunch 6K video, and we're doing at most the 4K stuff that's shot off a phone, and we have a new cameras that can do 4K really nicely, but we don't need this. We don't need this level of workstation, certainly not for $4,000. The animation, it should have been it was like Borg graphics. It should have been like Borg tentacles coming out of nanites, coming out of each and merging them, fusing these two chips together. So everything's basically doubled, right? You get 20 cores, and the design is very in line with, it's massively parallel. So 16 high performance cores, 4 efficiency cores. Although the 4 efficiency cores kind of feels like a relic of, the M1 designed for battery powered operations. Since this is going to be plugged in, and theoretically you're just going to be maxing out those cores. And with fans, of course, 64 core GPU, they say, they're targeting as fast as a 3080 here. No game support though, but if you need to render that Blender or render whatever your 3D models and effects work.
And as always, the industrial design looks great. I mean, I'll be curious again with the reviews to hear how that fan speed actually holds up, because they were saying under normal usage, you probably won't even hear it that much, but that is a small device, and it's got an internal power supply with proprietary cooling, but still like that's going to get hot, and I want to hear how well that holds up, because I could imagine that's going to be a loud fan.
Well, we don't know, because the nerd part that was interesting to me was all of the claims about how much less power it utilizes than what they called like equivalent desktop PCs. And so they were saying anywhere from like 100 watts to 200 watts less power. Maybe there is like significantly less heat because their power consumption is so much less. I wonder how much of a selling point that is. I found it really nerdy and interesting, but I don't oftentimes think about the power consumption of my PC in that context. But if that's true, that they're actually generating less heat, that is a huge step forward.
Well, also because this is something for the desktop. It's not like a traditional workstation or PC where you put on the floor. The form factor of this is supposed to live right next to your monitor and have all the ports accessible. Also, all the photos of this are Instagram angles for this, because they never show the back side. It's like 3 sides of this are nice and shiny, and the 4 sides, right? The 3 sides in the top are flat and aluminum, but the back is, if you look at the image of the back, it is one big rectangular exhaust or intake for the fan, and you'll never see that in any of the product photos.
It's the exhaust. The intake's at the bottom.
Oh, got it. So it's elevated a little bit, or around the edge, right? It's bottom along the edge, so it kind of cools and runs out the back. So, with that big exhaust, they're probably using fans that are a little bigger than the small fans, and they can push through air without getting too loud. But I still imagine this is going to be like Steam Deck levels of decibels. But to go along with this, Apple's getting back into the display game. I mean, I guess they were with that $5,000 super premium display, but now they have one little more affordable at $1,600, a 27-inch 5K display designed by Apple that you don't even need to spend $1,000 to put on a stand.
Yeah, no, I was nervous about that, as I'm sure others were when I went to look at the prices, because you do pick the display, basically the glass you want. They have a nano textured glass option for an additional $300. But then you pick the stand, and the stands have prices next to them. When I thought, okay, they are charging a lot for the stands, but it is not. It's sort of included. So you choose your stand when you choose the monitor.
So yeah, you aren't paying $1,000 for a stand, but you
Right.
are paying $400 if you want an adjustable stand. An extra $400 if you want to be able to change the height. I mean, this is meant for like artists and like high end users that are really doing it, that need like true colors because they have that P3 color system in it. It's like $600, $700, $800 more than equivalent monitors that are on the market. I think the advantage this has versus some of those other monitors on the market that have P3 color and at this resolution is that it has a chip in it for the camera. I would think a 12 megapixel camera, so you're going to look good on Zoom calls while having a excellent screen.
Here's a fascinating thing. You talk about supply chain and them using old chips. It's using an A13 chip in a monitor.
Well, how much processing does it need to do if
it
it's
doesn't.
just managing the camera, right?
It doesn't. It's like overkill for what they're putting in, but it's like they have the supply of it, and it show and they're building it into the markup. But like, what a weird use of a processor that is on many people's iPhones today, but to not use that for any type of application, standalone. Like, I would think they would build an Apple TV. Why not build in an Apple TV functionality in this? Sell a remote, I don't care, but have it so you don't need to plug into you don't need to boot up the Mac. You can just actually navigate it because it has the same processor.
That's an interesting thing. Like, that would be interesting. One more thing had they announced that.
Oh my gosh, right?
I like that idea.
Yeah. And it would be a putting your foot in the door into the long rumored them selling a physical TV with Apple TV built in, because it'd be the first step to that.
Yeah, and that would totally make sense. Or they could have just done AirTags with A13 chips because we have so many extras.
The monitor does have a 6-speaker sound system, which seems a bit overkill to me, especially given that they prioritize, depth of the product so much, and you can, speakers take up space. And I'll be very curious to hear how good it sounds. I would love to. I've always been curious about Apple's speakers because they typically are clear, but they with the exception of some of their HomePod devices, they lack range. And so I'll be curious to hear these, like a 6-speaker sound system in your monitor that supports spatial audio. I feel like that might be stretching a bit, but we'll see.
I've always been skeptical of speakers in monitors just because like room place, you don't have control over room placement in that context because you have to prioritize placement for your eyes, right? So I don't know. I'm curious. I'm sure it'll sound great, but is it worth that much extra money compared to just having a good set of speakers?
And can I just say, can we just include the VESA mount adapter in the monitor, please? Like, you don't make me choose between the stand or the VESA mount. Like, that should just come. And if I eventually want to switch out my stand for my own mount, I can do that. It should just be a part of the product. Come on.
That's how un-Apple thinking of you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
It all is in the interest of markup. 3 microphones in here, so it's a FaceTime device / Zoom device. Again, missed opportunities for it to run applications and without needing to plug in a computer for you to be able to do a FaceTime thing. It's again moving into the kind of the Amazon devices, smart devices territory with screens, but that's a way for them to justify that $1,600 price tag. And then, of course, it can power your laptop and power those new Mac Studios also with a 96-watt power supply built in. So that's launching real soon. I'm not a fan of the size. I think 27-inch is a little too small.
Really?
You think about like Apple had the Apple 30-inch monitor was one of the best 30-inch monitors 15 years ago when they were the first to the market with those 2560 by 1600 displays. Now I feel like you got to go higher. You got to go. A 27-inch. I would expect a refresh rate of over 144 hertz.
I don't know. I just bought my wife a 32-inch monitor, and I have to say, I think there is something about a sweet spot of a 27-inch size.
Yeah, I'm with Kishore. Like I have two 24s here, and I just got a 27 at work, and it feels very big to me. And I had a 30-inch monitor a long time ago, like back in Chicago when I was doing the podcast, and it was too much. It was too much monitor. Like I just didn't like it, and so yeah, I think it's a matter of taste, and I think 27 is a good sweet spot.
42 inches. 40 like once you go 42, it's hard to go back to 27.
Norm is trying to get a 42-inch monitor with like 1,000 nits so he can tan while doing work.
Oh yeah. Now all I need is 120 hertz, and this is 60 hertz locked in. So it's slightly disappointing. I think they either were going to sell the compute functionality of this with apps or Apple TV integration, or sell it as a best in class display, which they're not, because there's still that what is it, the XDR HDR display that they sell for a crazy amount. This is very consumer focused. They want this everywhere in design studios and schools and in people's homes.
Can I tell you about my one miss for this presentation? Like, yeah, it didn't have AR or big other things, but the only thing that I thought was so weird is they announced that partnership with Major League Baseball to air baseball on Friday nights. By the way, Major League Baseball is in a lockout and games are being canceled. So I was like, oh, what a weird announcement to announce basically a partnership with a league that is on strike for all intents and purposes.
That's funny.
I know it's a lockout, not a strike.
Personally, I would have liked to have heard something about a new line of earbuds or headphones, because Qualcomm just announced that they've found a way to stream lossless audio over Bluetooth, which so far has not been a possibility. And so the rumor is, or the expectation is Apple will have figured out their own solution in due time as well. And so I'll be curious to see if their next generation support that or not. And so I was hoping that we might see something along those lines, but I guess we'll have to wait a little longer.
Yeah, all the indication says that they're going to finally revamp the new the AirPod Pros this year, probably in a really inopportune time, or right in time for the holidays, or right after people just did a big push to buy the current Pros, and then we'll want to feel like they need to upgrade. But especially the studio headphones, the AirPod Maxes, because those don't even support lossless that they're pushing over Apple Music. Hey everyone, before we continue on this week, I want to let you know that This Is Only a Test is made possible this week from the Stack Overflow podcast, which you should check out. Wondering which skills you need to break into the world of technology or level up as a developer? Curious about how the tools and framework you use every day were created? The Stack Overflow podcast is your resource for tough coding questions and your home for candid conversations with guests from leading tech companies about the art and practice of programming. For 13 years, the Stack Overflow podcast has been exploring what it means to be a developer and how the art and practice of software programming is changing our world, as I'm sure it has been changing in their industry as well. The show dives into topics that matter from a listenership of developers, tech enthusiasts, and educators of all stages of their careers at this moment, and provides tangible tools and conversations about the infrastructure in tech right now. With new episodes twice a week, the show dives into topics like Web3, code security, cloud infrastructure, and how AI can solve real-world problems, and more. Listen at stackoverflow.com/podcasts or at any major podcast platform. Now back to the show. But that's it. Jeremy, the final Apple keynote event that we get to talk about in your time with the podcast. Certainly not a highlight.
You are free from discussing Apple ever
from
again.
The takes. The takes will be less hot.
Things that annoy me.
Gosh, I really wish they had done some AR thing. Maybe, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but we'll certainly personally discuss whenever Apple does an AR announcement. But maybe we'll do a Twitter thread to discuss it.
Look, I mean, Gary's been back on the show from time to time. I fully expect if this show, has the legs I suspect it has, you'll have an empty chair some Wednesday morning, and you'll send the flag out, and I'll answer the call. So I'll
Wait
be
a
back.
minute, wait a minute. You haven't even left and you're asking back in? What is this?
I'm offering my services
Deal
on the
sold.
spur of the moment someday in the future.
It's certainly, hopefully, for the Apple AR glasses event. I wouldn't want this M1 Ultra one to be the last one. Anyway, that's the news on the Apple front.
Let's go to the
And-
reminiscing. We've held off long enough.
Yes.
It's time to celebrate one Jeremiah Williams. Jeremy, why don't you actually talk about what you're up to at Other Ocean and like development? Because I've seen some commenters actually, curious about that.
Well, it is affiliated. It is all connected to Tested. Like I have Tested to thank for where I'm at right now, because we had Mike Micah, my supervisor, studio head of Digital Eclipse, on the podcast a couple times. And I don't know how the topic came to it, but we started talking about Warlords, and we wanted to make an homage to it, maybe a 6-player version, something, I don't know, maybe it could be sci-fi related. And then when Sean and I spun up Bits to Atoms, that Norm directed, we went up to Mike and we said, hey, what if we did that? And then it turned into Star-Lords, which was the final episode of Bits to Atoms, episode that was like 7 episodes long. And it was such a great experience working with them, with those game developers, making the arcade cabinet for it, and doing all the lights and bridging and just having that relationship and collaborative process. It spun into another project with them. And Sean and I ended up doing Tank Ball, which was a project that they were contracted to do by Microsoft for the Mixer, their Twitch competitor at the time. And that was fun as well. And we, like, the same team worked on that. It was me and Kevin and Sean and Mike. And eventually, it just turned into actual game development, because they connected us with Intellivision Amico, which at the time it seemed very, very interesting. More recently, they seem to be having some hard times, and I'm not sure what's going on with that console. But that opportunity to work on a game for Amico really just turned into an offer to work for Mike and Digital Eclipse, full time. And it all started with that podcast episode, reminiscing about Warlords. And I have been programming for, a limited number of years. I'm 48 years old, and I've only been programming for about 13 of those, the last 13. And I gotta say, every day I feel like I'm new at it. It is an infinitely challenging, pursuit. And if anything, it is, yes, it is infinitely challenging and infinitely gratifying. But I have felt that I am still so new, even having put thousands of hours into it, that I am just running to catch up. And it's almost like my whole life I should have been doing this, and I didn't realize that I could do it until I was, a certain series of events that led me to try it and put my foot in various, pools. And eventually I figured out this isn't so bad. And I wanted to encourage anybody else who might be in that same situation, where maybe you're a gamer and you don't think game development is something you can do because it's too cryptic. Programming might be too esoteric, then you'll never figure out the syntax. The languages are too confusing. There's so many ways to learn now that didn't exist when we were kids, in the same way that everything else that we have covered on Tested has democratized access over the past 10 years to electronics, to engineering, 3D printing, laser cutting, model making. All of these small businesses are spinning up because there's accessible technologies. Game design is the exact same way. Game making is the same way. Engineering, there's Unity and Unreal, which everybody knows are open engines. But there's also Game Maker. There's simpler things like Scratch that you can put your toes into, and do it. Like if you love games and you don't pass up the opportunity to try it out, because it is so gratifying. It is the most amazing sensation to make something and see it happen on the screen, have other people play it, and iterate on it. And you realize that games aren't fun at first in development. It's work. Like, it's not fun. But when you get to a point where people are enjoying it, it's an amazing feeling. And that's where I'm at. Like, I'm racing to catch up and get better. And that's just the only thing I'm thinking about these days. Like, I wake up thinking about what problem am I going to solve. I go to bed thinking about, like, what problem am I going to solve. And that's it. Like, I love it. I absolutely love it. And at this company, I have so much freedom, and I'm working with such talented people that have so much trust in me. And I really, really am enjoying myself. But because it's all I'm thinking about, like, I have a hard time thinking about Marvel. And I have a hard time thinking about Apple and, technologies. And I'm still, looking at the blogs now and then, but it is just not in the forefront of my mind. So that's where I'm at in life right now. So, and that's why I'm taking a break here to go just be in that space all week long.
You found your calling. Sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah, I did find my calling. I did. And this is what I want to do, this may be my last job. Who knows? But once I'm done at Digital Eclipse, I know I'm going to keep doing it. It's into retirement. I'm going to take advantage of all the open platforms, Steam, and all the free game engines or affordable game engines, and the ability to hire artists or maybe even work with artists full time on my own. Like, that's just clearly what I want to do. Like, no question. And I am so glad to be free of these pesky atoms that plagued my programming existence.
ATOMS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was nervous when you said pesky. What the next set of words was going to be?
Yeah. No. Sorry. No. Now from Game Frame on, dealing with physics is such a problem when I just want to solve, the code, when the code is hard enough to get right. When you have LEDs that aren't behaving right, and it has to do with your wires are too short, or, they're different lengths, or something's wrong. It's not cool. So I'm really glad. I love software development. There's a lot of benefits to it, and I'm really, really enjoying it. And I appreciate the connections that Tested helped me make with Digital Eclipse in order to make this happen. It's been an absolute joy the past 2 years that I've been working there.
I just want to say we've known each other for a long, we've been doing this forever now, like the three of us. And it was really enjoyable as your friend to watch the arc from the Game Frame to Star-Lords and all these projects in between that we've kind of glossed over, like the Captain Kirk chair and all the problem solving you did on that. And it's not just the problems that you solve, it's like your approach to problem solving that would come through on those projects, and seeing that blossom and grow. And I just remember it must have been like 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, and you were early in Other Ocean, and you were feeling like the stress of like this catch up that you were just talking about. But you could just like hear it in the, like, behind your voice about how excited you were. And like that was underneath like the stress of being in this new position. And it was just had this sensation of just like total fulfillment, like that this challenge was built for me. And honestly, I couldn't have been happier for you. Like, so for our listeners, you might be surprised. We're actually friends in real life, the three of us. And we'll have these moments like before and after the podcast where we're just talking about stuff. And like in those moments, I just got more and more of a sense like, oh, this is his thing. Like, I used to think that about pinball, but pinball is still always like, it's like a passion, but it's a hobby. This was always more than that. I heard like the little lilt in your voice. So I couldn't be happier for you. And to see the trajectory you've gone on, it's just totally inspiring for myself.
Yeah, and I think that trajectory is very it's very emblematic of the journeys that certainly all of us are still on, and people have been following and watching the channel because we've been doing this for so long. But for so many people that we meet, whether it's people at Maker Faire or younger kids, like they're all in different parts of that journey as well. Adam too, right? In terms of the type of content he's been making, and so not all of us find the thing that we feel like is our calling, and this is your journey is a perfect example of a really happy conclusion there, or at least the next stage of where you're at.
Yeah, but I really want to stress that I should have known. Like I feel like I should have known that this was a calling that I could have answered, but I never thought I could do it. And it's that element that wall's been broken down for me by the industry over the past 10 years, and I'm just so happy about that. And I'm not sure that is clear to everybody, and it's a powerful thing. I know like the maker community is filled with these experiences where people are making or engineering things from creative backgrounds they never thought they'd be doing this in their life. Well, game development is in there too. Game development is as much an interesting and stimulating and challenging and democratized field of engineering. And I'm speaking about programming specifically, but obviously there's many disciplines in game design. And I just want to make that clear that like try it. Anybody who's curious about it, get out and just download something free, watch some YouTube tutorials, and try it, because it is possible, and it's not worth. You don't want to miss out on it if it's possibly your calling. Are you guys hearing this crackling?
Nope.
Okay, good. That's just me.
Just in your voice, Jeremy. Just in your voice, because I know you feel very strongly about this. And your journey is it's like all the content we make here. It's permission structure to try new things and to take risks in your creative pursuits and your professional pursuits, and especially in the latter, those things are risky, and especially you feel like there's a part in your life that it's hard to try new things, or it's hard to make a leap elsewhere. But Ridley Scott didn't direct his first movie till he was in his late 40s, so you got a long career ahead of you in the world of programming. I'm just shocked, Jeremy, that podcasting wasn't your true calling.
Well, I think we've all known that podcasting wasn't any of our true calling for a while.
It only took you 17 years or so since we started on the PC Gamer podcast for you to realize that.
It's the episode 178 of the Tested podcast, the first episode I was on. We talk about that. We talk about the early days of the Tested podcast, and you try to download that episode, which I'm not sure it's even still out there. But
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you get away without a note of appreciation. And I hope all like the commenters and listeners send their notes of appreciation to Jeremy this week, just to let him know how much we've loved having you be a part of this. So the first episode we did together was December 3rd, 2015. You want to fathom a guess what the topic of that show was?
An Apple event.
It was about Apple rumors, but the title of the show was Save the Headphone Jack, which is quintessential Jeremy. And we talked about like science and stuff. And part of one of those early episodes, we ended up talking about like the place I work now and like the work that I do. So it's kind of funny how full circle it is. I was watching one of the kind of Ask Adam videos on the channel, and he was talking about kindness, like a very Adam thing to talk about. And Adam is so eloquent when he talks about kindness, both in like a parental context and a colleague context. There is no person that has exemplified kindness and heart on the Tested family more than you, Jeremy.
Oh, please.
Everyone.
I'm a bitter old man.
Yes, but you're not bitter about people. You're bitter about parking and like bad design and like like there's always like a warmth, like you're always nice and welcoming and easy to work with. I remember Adam coming and talking about the Shatner chair and how things went totally awry, and he was talking about how you actually like approached it, and like you were stressed out, but you just like kept working at it, and didn't like, you probably were frustrated, but you didn't like take that out on people.
It was a disaster. That was like, I mean, I think that was the first thing I did with Adam. I think
it was. We brought you in as an electronics guy.
Yeah, I think
and you had to like resolder the entire board, right?
I mean,
At one
it
point,
was just a disaster. Like we spent the whole day aside to shoot that, and by the end of the day, it was not working. Like, and it was supposed to be. We hooked it all up for this culmination, and it was just the lights did not turn on, and it was embarrassing because I was supposed to be the one in charge of making the lights turn on. It did not work, but Adam was super patient about it and really cool. I mean, he is a consummate professional, and he is just like he makes other people feel comfortable, even though the fact he could do anybody's job better than they could. And I really, really appreciate his patience in that moment. And I went home and I like re-engineered it at home that night, and I like sent him a picture. I was like, I think I got it. It's gonna be okay. And he was very cool about it. He's like, it's okay, it's okay. We'll reshoot it next week. You know, we'll finish this shot next week, and it'll be fine.
I'll post a photo. I took a photo of all you guys, Will in the background soldering, and Adam and you, like just 1 foot on the exposed open captain's chair, just in a pondering mood, like right in the middle of that build. I remember fondly that moment. So I'll post that on social media. And Jeremy, I'll also, without your involvement and being enthusiastic about these emerging technologies, we wouldn't be talking about VR and AR in the same way, because it was your first Oculus DK2 or DK1, the first development kit, the Kickstarter backed DK1 that we borrowed to do that first video about it. And then we had 2 of them, and we were one of the only people to have 2 because Will backed it as well. And then, to be on the forefront of that and to ask the right questions and to think about this emerging technology that now is consuming, the tech space in the metaverse talk, to be at the very forefront of that. We owe it to you.
Oh, well, I mean, I think we were all on the same bandwagon. I just happened to have pressed that Kickstarter purchase, a few minutes earlier. That was doing projections was absolutely one of the highlights of my life. I for a moment there, like that felt like, okay, I could do this. This would be cool. Like this could potentially, like a possible life future would be doing projections as its own thing, like spinning it off from Tested, doing VR, media coverage for the next few years. Like that was a real possibility when we would go to those events and we would see how well received our content was. I felt like it was worthwhile to consider that as a possible actual career. And I just loved VR so much, and I still do. I just checked out. I forget the name of the mech game that just came out on Quest. Next Machina. It was on PC years ago. We interviewed those guys, and it's on Quest now, and it looks great. It plays excellent. It's one of the best Quest ports I've seen. But so I'm still watching that space as close as ever. We are just not covering it quite as much, and I look back on that show really, really fondly. Love doing projections.
Yeah. Vox Machina, those guys.
What is it? What's called?
Vox Machina.
Vox. That's it. Yeah.
And then we the highs that we got from covering that, just chatting with the excited developers and hardware makers, and meeting those people who just feel like they were at the forefront of this new exciting thing that was very tangible and a new experience. And that was the best part, meeting those folks that we're still friends with today.
Absolutely. Yeah, because at the time, like they weren't sure if there was an audience for this or not. And so, but they were clearly excited about it. And a lot of developers in the early days weren't backed by anybody. They were in it because they loved it. And that's still the case. And I think like it's still a nascent industry, and it's the people who are doing VR development are really passionate about it, and to an extent that people making apps for the App Store aren't necessarily.
Yeah. I think back to even before we did the podcast, Jeremy, when we were at magazines, and working, and you were doing stuff for the PlayStation Core stuff, and we were all together at the company Future. You were the first person that we jailbroke phones together with to play Tap Tap Revolution on our first iPhones, or the iPhone 3G, and downloading those jailbreaks before an app store existed. I remember you walking in and talking to Will and I about the concept of a 3D printer when the first MakerBot was also as a kit being launched, and like, ooh, it's the Star Trek dream. Yeah. And it was those conversations that got us to buy the first Cupcake CNC as a kit and build as one of our first videos on Tested.
Oh, wow.
And I remember you even before we had Glowforges talking about let's do a timeshare on a laser cutter, and let's look at spending $5,000 to $10,000 on a laser cutter and getting really excited about that.
Yeah. You obviously like the biggest of, maybe second to my job right now. The biggest influence Tested has had on me personally has been Game Frame, because I brought the Pixel Box on the show with no expectation of doing anything with it. Your audience, our audience, said, take my money, kickstart this, make it. And I worked with a local laser cutting company to make it. And I ended up being one of their biggest customers because of all the Kickstarter success. And I ended up meeting with their CEO a couple times in person, like having lunch. And I said, you should make the MakerBot of laser cutters. And he was like, I don't know. That seems awfully ambitious. And then like a couple of years later, Glowforge happened. It's exactly what I wanted to happen.
Yeah. And now we have those.
Exactly.
And there's one in the background. You have one in your garage, and also drones. I don't think people know this, because we covered drones together, and you were one of you bought the DJI the Phantom 2, I believe. I remember chatting with you on, what was it, AIM or GChat way back as we're going to CES, and you're like, you should check out this DJI company. And we found, and it was when they had a small booth on the main floor of CES. And it was there that we had our first conversations. It got a first demo.
I think you're giving me too much credit for of this.
Jeremy, I am not, because I remember
you were ahead of the curve. You were on so many things.
And I remember you sending me the link of like, this company looks like they're making cool drones. And when we sought them out at CES, and now they're one of the biggest tech companies in the world. And they own Leica. There you go. Or not like they own Hasselblad. They own Hasselblad. There you go.
Electric cars, you are ahead of the curve on Bolts being recalled across this country.
I got rid of mine right in time.
The Raspberry Pis. You worked with Teensies. That was the thing you loved all the time. Like you were always like experimenting with stuff at the edge. And that, I think that's why, part of the reason why the audience loves you so much is like, you're just so authentic about all of this stuff. It just comes from like a pure place of curiosity. And that will be forever missed on this show.
That's very nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I am putting all of that love into game design right now. Like the things that I'm working on right now are absolutely from the heart, and I cannot wait to share them with the world and you, because I think that a lot of the respect that I have for the certain areas of games, and wanting to get things right and not just put something out that is, I don't know, an app on the App Store. Wanted to do what VR developers are doing for VR for classic games, rather than just put something out there that might make some money, is what I'm really enjoying right now. So it's all happening still, but it's all funneled down into game dev, and it's really, really fun.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. Good luck on your future projects and your endeavors, and I'm so happy that you found your calling and you're finding something that you like. That's all we look for. We look for something to wake up and be excited about every morning. And it sounds like this is it. And thank you for your insights and your friendship and your enthusiasm. And I'm sure we don't be a stranger on the show. I'm sure we'll have you back sometime in the future.
That would be my pleasure. And I love you two very, very much. I have enjoyed talking with you every week, almost every week. And for the, how many years now? I don't know. In multiple sets, from home, from the office, in VR, playing VR. And so I don't plan to be a stranger. I plan to, bug you guys to play Demio on the weekends. And I might come knocking and asking if I can be on the show in not too long. So thank you guys.
You could, of course, follow Jeremy on social media at Jareware, if I had that right. That's right.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
still
that's
January.
That's it.
I think I officially won the Twitter Twitter follower battle between us that we started. Oh, by the way, we started it on that show, that first show that we were on together.
Really?
Is when that started.
Episode 178. Yes. There you go. At Science Quiche, still on top right now. And you know what, out there, listeners, we've got breaking news as we're recording this. Jeremy, the trailer for Obi-Wan has dropped on StarWars.com. We're not even going to get a chance to talk about that. Maybe next week. And if you think about the future of the show, we're going to continue doing this. Kishore and I, we're going to bring in some contributors in the meantime, while we kind of look at things.
Yeah,
let us know. Let us know.
Yeah, let's be clear. There's no replacing Jeremy.
Yes.
And we're not going to try. But I think what Norm and I really talked about is we really enjoy talking to different makers and contributors that are, part of the Tested family and the Tested extended family, and bringing them in and having them sort of nerd out on what they specialize in, and doing that with a mix of us covering the topics of the day as well. So the format might shift a little bit, but I think what you're going to see is a rotating list of interesting people. So if there's people that you would love to see on the show, either in terms of being interviewed or just sort of guesting, let us know.
Yeah.
But most of all, thank Jeremy for all the years. Thanks, my friend.
Back at you.
All right, we got one outro for you today, a vintage outro, but I think it's appropriate. This one, as you might have guessed, or maybe unsurprising, is Jeremy themed. Here we go. From Great Job.
Hi there, I didn't see you. Tested.
Dude, I went to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The worst thing possible. I've never been more furious in a theater in my life. I'm telling you, this takes the cake. We sit down, we watch all the previews, and then lights go down. The movie's about to start. They freaking show a 10-minute featurette all about the film that shows every single sci-fi shot in the movie. They show the aliens at the end.
Wait, a featurette?
Yes, like a DVD featurette about making They show dialogue. They show the interesting lines. It's for people who've seen the movie before. They just completely forgot that there might be people who've never seen it before. And it ruined it. I couldn't believe it. Whoa. I was about to scream at the screen at the projectionist. I was livid. I couldn't believe that they were doing this. And I wanted to write Steven Spielberg. I swear to God, I wanted to tweet at him. Say, Mr. Spielberg,
you know what they're doing to your film?
No, because he would never approve of this. He would never approve of this. Things that annoy me.
All right. Have a great week, everyone. See you next time. Bye.